Welcome to Forgiveness Road with Ron and Tanya. We travel the country in search of remarkable forgiveness stories. In this episode, we're starting a new series on forgiveness as it specifically relates to parents. There's an old saying goes that the people closest to you can hurt you most. And we kind of want to take a trip down that lane. So if you have a good story, if you know of somebody that's endured a very difficult parent situation or a surprise situation with parents that might be helpful and instructful, we'd like to hear from you. So just put it down in the comments below. Let us know if you've got a great forgiveness story. So today with me is one of my favorite guys on the planet. His name is Doug. Okay, Doug's got kind of a unique twist to his forgiveness story. Doug, tee it up, buddy.
Wow, where do I start?
Probably yes. Your life began at a very young age.
Probably to start the journey, I would have to I'd have to go back to 1967. I was the youngest of three. I had two older sisters, and mom and dad were madly in love with each other. We lived in a small community up in Idaho, and it was the type of family where, you know, we knew mom and dad loved each other, and we always knew that mom and dad loved us. There were those times where I would deserve a spanking, and trust me, I got them.
Back in the day when they spanked
When
people,
they spanked children. But I always knew, even within the spankings, that my dad loved me. And his love was constant. Anyway, I loved my dad. He was the type of man that would take me fishing and go in the backyard, throw the football, play baseball. We spent a lot of time, probably one of my most favorite times, and this might sound weird to some, but Sunday afternoons on the couch in our underwear watching football. That was one of my absolutely favorite times, because it was time together. You know, we've talked previously about communication and how us guys can just be, and not have to share.
Not say a word.
Not say a
just
word.
drive a truck going up hunting. You
It's
don't
all
have to
good.
say a word.
It was a great day.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the type of relationship I had with my dad. I was 4 years younger than my next sibling. But in 1967, this happened to be on Labor Day weekend. It was a little bit overcast, kind of like it is today. A little chilly. We all know that Labor Day is kind of the end of summer. But my dad had a pallet of shingles dropped off next to the house, and he did a lot of the work himself. We didn't have a lot of money, so, you know, he didn't pay people to do things that he thought he could do.
Sure.
So he had gotten me up early that morning, and my sisters had left. They still had some lawns that they were mowing. That was their summertime job. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so Dad got me all bundled up. I was 7 years of age, and we climbed up on the roof, and he carried the shingles up one bundle at a time up the ladder and got them spread out on the roof. And so it was time with Dad. It was awesome. And I don't mean to go into great detail. It was our time together.
Absolutely.
And so as we continued working on the roof, we were getting everything ready to get started. And my job was to open the bundles of shingles. And in those days, the asphalt shingles had a strip of plastic on it. You would take that off of the sticky portion. And so I was going to be handing those to my dad. There wasn't a lot of words spoken that morning, but he had started the first nail in the very first shingle, and he laid his hammer down and laid back. This is going to be tough. Anyway, he laid back and looked at me, never said a word, closed his eyes, and was gone.
7 years old.
One part of the story, I had a cousin that was actually on the roof with us. It was interesting how he got there, because he wasn't staying with us. He actually was visiting some relatives that lived fairly close to us. But anyway, he turned and said, "You need to go get your mom. Something's wrong with your dad." And so that was kind of where I felt like that my relationship with my mom really began to gel, because I spent a lot of time with my dad. I love my dad. Mom now was on her own, raising 3 children, and she was the type of mom that she would talk to you about anything. And I don't know about you, but conversations with our children about the birds and the bees is not the most comfortable one. But Mom was always very, very upfront and very open about that. So if we were able to have conversations like that, we had conversations about everything, and I mean everything. So everything was okay. I knew that we were going along well, as far as a 7-year-old boy could understand. A woman of my mom's age with 3 children and the struggles financially and emotionally, relationship-wise, she felt like she needed somebody. And so she remarried about 2 years after my dad passed away. So we had a blended family, and we moved out of the Nampa area, out into the countryside. That particular time was not one of the more friendly times or happy times in my life. My stepdad was a very angry man, was very abusive to his own children, which obviously that came over on to us as well, and to my mom. Those years were really difficult, and I didn't understand why my mom would make that decision. Again, at 7 years of age, we don't understand that.
Sure.
So, but we lived through those years, and eventually my stepdad retired. We moved back into Nampa, and after his retirement, they built a house there in Nampa, and I was in the floor carving at the time. I've done floor carving most of my life, and was able to help them, put the house together. And anyway, so my wife and I, we were pretty much there for Mom and Bill for the better part of 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that Mom and Bill needed, if there was a plumbing issue and Bill was getting to the point in age-wise, physically he wasn't able to do the things that he could. It was interesting. There seemed to be a change with us, with the anger I had towards my stepdad, because he did not act like my real dad did.
Sure.
He would strike out of anger. The spankings that came from my real dad, I knew they were coming, and I knew that he loved me in the midst of them. That wasn't the case with my stepdad.
Sorry to hear that.
So I think that there was a period of time where I was trying to process, again, why would my mom do this? And maybe we can talk a little bit later about the forgiveness part of that, because I think that for me, there were certain points in my life where I was angry and didn't understand decisions. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we go through times when we question God and say, why me? What did I do to deserve this? And that was part of my process as a little boy. Why did you take my daddy away from me? A lot of those questions will be answered later.
So at 7 years old, you lose your father. You're working up on a roof together, and he has some type of life episode where it takes his life. Your mom remarries a couple years into it, and stepdad's nothing like bio dad.
No.
And this starts a chain of bumps and bruises of relationship, literally and figuratively. And but yet you're crazy about your mom, and she's crazy about you. And so things go on. And so how many years downrange before the episode where you and your mom had a crash?
It was in years. I'd have to stop and calculate it, but that's happened most recently.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, my wife and I, we were pretty much there to take care of
Yep.
her and my stepdad. Between the two families, there were 7 children.
Okay.
I being the youngest out of the 7.
Okay.
Some poor choices out of the 7 that put them in positions where they were not in a position to be able to help Mom and Bill. My 2 sisters specifically had chosen mates that took them out of the area, and they
Right.
went and they had children, and never during this process have I held that against them. I felt like that they needed
Sure.
to live their lives.
Absolutely.
Marilyn and I happened to be in the Napa area, and it was just one of those things, you pick the torch up and you carry it. So I've never held that against my sisters, that they were gone.
So basically, you're the MacGyver of the family. Anything that's broke, you fix it.
I was fixing
You're the
it.
caretaker. You're the dutiful son who wants to do right, and you take great joy out of loving your mom and your stepdad by helping take care of their needs.
Right,
So you just assume the role of caretaker,
right,
and have always taken care
right.
of not just them but a lot of other people. So set us up for how did your relationship with your mom turn out the way you didn't want to have it happen?
Well, my wife and I, we worked as a team. As you say, mechanically, I was the MacGyver.
Yes.
I was good with duct tape, baling wire, whatever it took.
Sure.
My wife did better with the emotional support and with the sickness support. My
Sure.
mom seemed to be sick a lot. Things would upset her.
Yeah.
So Marilyn would spend nights with her with, the wash rag and just being there, tending to someone you love.
Physical caretaking.
Physical
Yeah.
caretaking. And as she did with her own parents. And if you're watching some of the other episodes, you'll get to hear that story, which is just amazing to me. But anyway, so we were there for the better part of 30 years, and my 2 sisters decided that they were going to move back into the area to help take care of Mom.
Okay.
Neither of my sisters still are at a point where they can help my mom financially, mechanically, emotionally. Maybe.
They're just present.
They're present. Not the help that I felt like I needed, and definitely not the help that my mom needed.
Sure.
Again, I don't hold that against them.
Right. Well, you got a unique role. You're a son, but you're taking care of a lot of things.
A few things.
Yeah.
So, in the process of things, my mom owned a home, and with my stepdad, we ended up having to put him into nursing care. With all of that, my mom received a letter from the state stating that they reserved the right to lien half of the house,
Sure.
which is all the legal process. But within that, anything like that upsets my mom to no end.
Sure.
And I just kept telling her, you don't have to worry about it. You can live in your house. Everything's going to be fine. So at one point in time, to try to lift that burden off of her, because she loved her house, didn't want to move, didn't want to leave. We only lived about a mile away from her, so we were there. I asked her if she wanted to sell the house to
Sure.
us and get it out of her name, and then I could take care of everything.
Sure.
Property taxes, if something broke, went down, et cetera, et cetera.
Looking ahead, trying to be a blessing.
Trying to take care of things and leave her in the place where she
Sure.
felt comfortable.
Sure.
That action, I believe, created a chain of events where maybe someone within the family was feeding my mother doubts and questioning my actions, that I wasn't necessarily there to help my mom. And in the process of this, I got a phone call from the younger of my 2 elder sisters saying that we needed to have a sibling meeting. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I drove to the desired location, and as we were kind of talking up front, the younger of the 2 sisters happened to say to me, before we get started, I just need to make sure that we're just completely honest here. And I had no problem with that.
Sure.
I told the story that I had nothing to hide. Everything that I had done was full disclosure to anybody in the family. And so I said, "Yeah, that's great. I'm all about that."
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out where this is coming from, and we don't even get through the first topic of conversation, and she turns to me and says, "By the way, you need to know that Mom wrote you off." And it's like, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, she wrote you out of the will." And I said, "I'm fine with that. There's nothing that I want." To backtrack a little bit, it's interesting what we do when we get closer to the end of our years.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to give things away, and
Right.
maybe take, some families will take masking tape and write a family
Person.
member's name on
Sure.
it, and they'll put it on the back of the item.
Right.
That's who it goes to.
Yeah.
Mom had been doing some of that. And again, I didn't want anything. I just loved my mom and enjoyed our relationship because, quite frankly, we had a relationship that neither of my sisters had with her through the years. I'm not blaming them, or again, I don't hold that against
Right.
them. It was the way that it worked for us. And anyway, so back to the conversation. Mom wrote you off. So, okay, so I'm out of the will, no big deal. She said, "No, you need to know that the bank accounts that you had signatures on, she closed all those accounts." Okay, that's interesting. You're no longer the durable power of attorney, and you are no longer the executor of the estate. Which was a little bit of a shock because, again, the two older sisters financially have not been in a position to be able to help. God's blessed me with work, blessed me with a very good paying job.
Right.
He's given me the tools that I could be there and make the funds to support my family, but also to do, extra for the church, but also to be there to help my mom. So as I sat back in the chair, you can only imagine, it just felt like the wind had been kicked out of me.
Wow.
30 years of being there, making sure Mom specifically had everything.
Yeah.
But also helping my stepdad. There was a shift there as we became peers. Was a lot easier to be around him, and I don't know if that was part of my forgiveness of Bill and his actions. I think that there was a certain part of me that when I began to peel the layers back and find out my stepdad's upbringing and what he didn't have with his parents, what he didn't have with his own children. He didn't have a good self-worth. He didn't love himself.
Right.
And when I began to realize some of those things, I think it was a lot easier for me to be around him and maybe understand him a little bit more.
So, Doug, you mentioned something I think that's really important as an aspect to forgiveness. As you started to understand what your stepdad had gone through, you saw things that were missing in his life that would have helped him a great deal. And so when we think about forgiveness, it's recognizing the humanity of the other person. He's made out of the same stuff you are, right?
Right.
Now, obviously, we all make choices, and our choices have a big impact on our relationships. But when we recognize that the other person has baggage in their attic, they've got problems that have never been addressed, or they've just always lived their life a certain way, you get into ruts in life. And so when you recognized his humanity, you started having probably more compassion for where he was at.
I think I actually got to the point where I felt sorry for him.
Right.
All the things that he didn't have
Right.
that I had
Sure.
with my real dad, my birth dad, and the relationship that I had with my mom.
Sure.
He didn't have that relationship.
Right.
And
Right.
I actually feel sorry for him.
Sure. Sure. You can have compassion on a person who actually hurts you when you start remembering what they've been through. He had a lot of bumps in his road of life, and sometimes those produce anger, right? Sometimes there's an incorrect response to our problems and troubles. So if you're listening today right now and you're having forgiveness issues, that's something to maybe think about. Is that, can you recognize the value of the other person as another human? So as we think about forgiveness, let's go back to the story. You're having a sit-down meeting with your sisters. It's just been disclosed to you that your mom has written you off the will. You're no longer the durable power of attorney. Your names are no longer on the financial assets that you actually purchased and put money in the bank so your mom would have resources. And so, was it that they misinterpreted the help you offered?
Ron, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I've not thought about that. I'll have to process that.
Yeah.
That's not been part of the process of my thinking or trying to deal with it.
But for 50 years, you've had this relationship with your mom, and now all of a sudden something's off.
Something is definitely off.
Have you ever been able to diagnose what that something is?
No, and the one thing that I wished, I wish today that whatever had been said to Mom, or the feelings that she had, or the fears, because my mom had a lot of fears in her life.
Sure.
Come and share those with me.
Right.
Tell me what it is that you're afraid of. Tell me what it is that you think I'm doing wrong. Come tell me.
Yeah.
I can't fix it if I don't know what it is.
So good. That's such a good point. Oftentimes we get to places where we have loss, we have a break in the relationship, and we're just dumbfounded. How did this happen? And so you're missing the puzzle pieces to get the whole picture, right? Still to this day, you're missing those pieces.
Yes, and I may miss them for quite some time.
Right.
So in the conversation with the sisters, I don't even know how to explain the emotion. We were laughing. We were talking about the emotions chart earlier. It was almost like I said, the wind had been kicked out of me, and I was almost withdrawn from the scene. And I simply told my sisters, I guess, then Mom's needs and everything are up to you, and I'm out of the picture.
Is that what they meant when they said you're out of the will, you're out of the oversight responsibilities?
I took it that the younger sister was...
Or do they still want you doing what you always did, but no longer...
Again, great question.
Yeah.
Did not ask that,
Yeah.
have not asked myself that.
Yeah.
I simply took it that my younger sister was relaying information and I was out.
Got it.
So
what did that do to your heart?
It was tough. I felt like I had been maybe rejected. I didn't understand because I thought I had been doing everything right. I thought I had done everything that was expected of me.
To hear those words from your sister, did it bring you pain?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was deeply hurt because it's like I said, Mom and my relationship, we were close, and then for her to completely reject me like that late in life.
Sure.
If we're giving up age, I'm 56, 57 years of age at that time.
Yeah.
So, like as you said, we're quite a ways downrange at this point in time.
So that's another great point about forgiveness. Out of nowhere, we can get a hurt. The relationship may be perfect up to this point, or not less than perfect, or, all of us have bumps in the road in our relationships. And as we said up at the front of sometimes the people who you love most will hurt you most. And so in forgiveness, we usually like to have people think through this particular point, is that if you don't have pain, there's nothing to forgive, right? Unless something's happened in the relationship to produce pain, you've got nothing to forgive. Now, in this case, you've mentioned rejection, You mentioned alienation, shoved away. Your services are no longer necessary from someone's position. You've always been in a helper role, and now that's been taken from you.
I'm a guy. I want to fix things, right? Right.
Amen.
So
We like to be fixers, don't we?
So we go away from the conversation. I went home and I shared with my wife. I said, I can't believe what I just heard.
Yeah.
And I shared, and she asked me, well, how does that make you feel? And I just was kind of dumbfounded. So to fast forward through a couple more years, my stress level at work was increasing. The stress amongst the family and what was or wasn't going on. My wife felt a need that she needed to get me out of my position.
Yeah.
She was afraid I was going to die of a heart attack. And anyway, so we began to look for other avenues of employment. We made the decision to sell everything that we had in Nampa and move down to Arizona to take a job in a completely different field, something that we had no idea of. And so we were separated from the family. I had done everything that I could for 30 years. And quite frankly, Ron, I felt good about it.
Sure.
I thought,
Your
okay,
conscience was clear. Yeah.
I did what I was asked to do for 30 years, and I'm good with that.
Yeah.
At night, when I laid my head on the pillow, I knew that I had done everything that I needed to do.
Sure.
And there was no guilt. I did not feel any convictions as far as that is concerned. God had taken us out of that particular place and had sent us literally to the desert in Arizona, maybe to get away from all of that.
Yeah.
So as we're doing our thing in Arizona, and I'm good with it, with everything, by that time my mom had moved into independent living in a facility up there in Idaho. My sisters were still in the area. My eldest sister, I've not really shared anything about her, but she actually had a lot of major physical issues, and so she was actually living in nursing care. So again, physically she wasn't able to do anything for Mom. But they were there and everything was fine, and Mom and I didn't speak. I received an email that had gotten lost in some of our other emails, and so it was a little late getting to us, but within this email, it was from my mother, and she had written this letter to me stating some of the things that she felt in her heart. One of them was she insinuated that I had stolen from her financially. She had insinuated in the letter that in biblical principles that I, as the only son in the family at that point in time, it was my duty to make sure that she was taking care of all of her needs. And that one I had some conflicting thoughts, because it's like, you pushed me away, but you're telling me that I need to fulfill that position. And I didn't know how to process that. As I started our conversation, Ron, I mentioned, how much I love my dad. What he meant to me. The one thing in the letter that she did that probably creates most pain is she said in that letter that my dead father would not be proud of me.
Oh, wow. Wow. I can't imagine how that hurt.
We'll get through this. So, what do I do with that? So I printed the email out and I took it to my pastor. There was a few key people in my life, and one of them that was a real shocker was my son, who, as we've talked, is currently living in Munich, Germany. And I read the letter to him, and he was, because that was the first time in my life that I laid something at my son's feet and asked him, I need your advice.
I need your advice.
What do I do with this? Because after she made those claims, and literally in the paragraph below where she told me that my dead father would not be proud of me, she said that she needed money to continue living in the independent living facility that she was in, where she was safe and everything was
Needs were taken
comfortable.
care of.
Needs
Yeah.
were taken
Yeah.
care of. And all of the process of me, I was there, I took care of her, you wrote me off, you basically told me I'm no longer one of your children. I don't need you, I don't want you. And now she's asking for financial assistance. And I gotta tell you, I really struggled over that.
The confusion part of it.
Well, yeah, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do?
What's the right thing to do?
What's the right thing to do? And if you've pushed me away, what obligation do I have
Right.
to fulfill your request,
Right.
especially after the things that you've said to me?
Without any interaction of trying to make it right. There's a demand for services.
Nothing. There wasn't,
Right.
I'm sorry I wrote you off.
Right.
There wasn't, would you please still be
Yeah.
part of the family? Would you please call? Would you? There was none of that.
And don't you find that to be true that sometimes our relationships can be so unsatisfying because there doesn't seem to be any closure or conclusion?
No. And
It's just fuzzy.
very fuzzy.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine the discussions that I had with my wife.
Mhm.
You can only just imagine the discussions that I had with both my children.
Yeah.
And trying to seek wisdom from
Yeah,
my pastor
sure.
and again, some key people that would give me the wisdom.
And that's a great point. If you're at a place with your relationships, it's really good to go out and seek good help. It's okay to share where there's brokenness because sometimes things are hidden right in darkness. But when the light gets exposed to like another set of eyes, another set of ears, another heart, another brain, when we go to people that we trust, that are wise, that'll give us good, clean perspective, it really helps us, doesn't it? So
Because-
did any of those people help you?
Yes and no. I would love to be able to tell you that
Yeah.
I was given gems of wisdom
Right.
that made everything clear and the
Right.
clouds parted
Yeah.
and the sun rays came down.
Rainbows and unicorns.
Doug, this is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
It didn't come.
Right, exactly.
But during the process, I as my wife and I were talking, I told my mom, I told my wife that I think that what I should do is I should grant her request, regardless of the very
Right,
hurtful things that
Sure.
she had said to me.
right.
What boy wants to hear those words?
Oh. It's the ultimate soul wound, right?
Especially with a father that you dearly love and that you miss
Right.
even this late in life. So she agreed to support me in my decision that we granted my mother's request to send her funds,
Even though
even though.
you're cut off.
And I did not have a conversation with either of my sisters. I don't know if it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I'm human. I agreed to do so, but I only agreed to do it for 1 year. And
Right.
at the close of December 31st would be the last that the funds,
Okay.
actually the funds went on December 1st, which would help pay for her living
Okay.
expenses until the 31st of December. And January 4th, my wife and I, we had a couple things going on here on the property where we were up late. We had turned our phones off because we were in an activity. And when we got home, we forgot to turn them back on. Well, family members were trying to get a hold of us over the night. My mom had gone into the ER, wasn't feeling well, and had passed away on January 5th. So I supported her financially
Right.
through the end of the year.
Right.
5 days later, she passes away.
Wow.
And so my sister, when when we got the next morning and the phone calls that we had missed, I called my sister and she kind of brought me up to date. This would be the younger of the two sisters that I actually talked to, and she brought me up to date of how the events folded out and who was at the hospital. And I'm very grateful for close friends.
Sure.
because we do have some close friends back in Idaho that still stand in the gap.
Yeah.
And some of our friends that I grew up with, they were at the hospital the night my mom passed away. And so they stood in the gap while I wasn't there. So then there was some questions whether or not, I was going to be at the funeral because of everything that had transpired.
Sure.
But we made the commitment to
Be there.
to fly up, and we were at the funeral, which both my sisters were grateful for, and my nieces were there. And anyway, in the midst of the confusion and what's Doug going to do,
Right.
the right thing was to be there.
Absolutely.
and
Sure.
and let the events go from there.
Yeah.
So as far as my forgiveness,
Yeah.
I feel like there's several things
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like I needed to forgive my mom for,
Okay.
whether or not she felt like she had done anything wrong. And I'm sure that road
Yeah.
travels both directions. Her decision to marry my stepdad and to take us to
Right.
Kuna, and then her decision to cut me off were two of the big ones.
And then the letter
The letter,
stating the most hurtful words you could ever digest as a son.
and the hard part of it for me on this particular part of the forgiveness,
Journey.
the journey, but the closure to get to that point that okay, I've not arrived there.
Yeah.
And as I begin to understand Bill and how he was raised and the hurt and the pain that
Right.
he went through, I began to understand that, and it was a process of forgiveness,
Sure.
and to the point of feeling sorry for him,
Right.
and loving him in a way that
Yeah.
I could love him
Yeah.
more as a peer than a
Right.
father-son.
We often talk about forgiveness being a solo, but reconciliation is a duet. Did you get either one of those?
How do you reconcile with somebody that's passed on
That's right.
that you've not had that
That's right.
conversation with?
That's right.
And so the reconciliation will have to be, I still think it's going to be part of my process
Yeah.
until I get there.
Yeah.
Do I forgive my mom? Yeah. I love my mom.
Sure.
She gave me some, we talked about it. We had
Yeah.
some awesome years.
Right.
And even though I didn't have the finish at the end of the race,
Right.
like we had hoped,
Yeah.
I still had how many years of
Sure.
an awesome relationship with my mom
Sure.
that a lot of people don't have.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful for those years, and thankful that God gave me those years.
Amen. That's for sure. That's for sure. You may have a relationship that you're struggling with right now. And I see so many takeaways from your story. And I think the first one is always go above and beyond board to try to communicate. Try to keep the channels open. Now, in your case, you got the garage door. Remember the old Maxwell Smart? Dun, dun. The garage door
As
just
he
keep
walked
on
through
shutting
them.
as he walks through them.
There was no turning back.
Right, you had a garage door shut down on you. And you honored the boundaries that they requested. But yet, it had to be frustrating without the closure. So if you're struggling in a relationship right now that doesn't seem to have closure, did you hear what Doug did? When he was perplexed, he went to some people that he trusted, considered wise, and that would give you good counsel. Now, you probably didn't get all the answers you wanted, but was it helpful at least asking?
Yes, it was helpful, but also with the process of going to my son,
Yeah.
there was another step taken between our relationship that
Right.
how many fathers go to their sons for advice?
Oh, I love that.
And that
I
was
love
that was huge to him.
that. Yeah.
You'd have to ask my wife because they talk a lot. He probably shared that with her.
That was a new moment of a leaf turning over in
For
your
him.
relationship. Yeah.
And so that was one more step in a deeper relationship
Yeah.
with my son that I definitely didn't have with my stepdad, and obviously I didn't get the chance to have with my real dad.
Sometimes we talk about relationships are like a diamond,
Mm.
right? There's many facets to our relationship. And usually as a dad to a son, now you're going as a father to your son for advice and for counsel and perspective, right?
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking what that meant to him for his dad to go to him when he's always gone to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a neat new facet in your relationship that had a twinkle to it.
Yes.
Yeah, the light caught that. Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
if I had to go through the pain to start that
Yeah,
relationship or that evolution of the relationship,
sure,
it was worth it.
right.
It was worth it
Sure.
because hopefully how I've portrayed myself, my son, number one, he knows, there's no question my son
Right,
knows that I love him. My
Sure.
daughter's the same way. There's
Sure.
no question
right,
that my love for either one of them.
right.
But for him to come to the realization that dad thinks enough of me
Mhm.
to ask the question,
Yeah.
what do I do with this?
Yeah.
He wasn't quite sure what to do with
I
it
bet
to
he did.
start
I bet he
with.
did.
It was like, you're asking me?
Well, sometimes when people come to us for counsel or perspective, it comes out of nowhere. And so you had built into his life so many years. He'd just been loved well. You guys had just tried to provide the best education as possible, right? Christian school, and he went off to, your kids went off to Northwest Nazarene University.
Yes.
So they had
Yeah.
that. I know your daughter's amazing and is a brainiac and has got her master's. And so you guys really, really groomed your kids to be ready for that moment.
We were hoping that they'd be ready.
Yeah.
Because ready or not,
Yeah.
here it is.
Yeah, that's right. So if you're in a relationship that's just kind of giving you a zinger, like in Doug's case, everything was fine, it seemed like, up until this one moment, 50-some years downrange, 57 years downrange.
Yes.
And out of nowhere comes this fracture in your relationship. And you would say it's very unsatisfying because of the outcome, right? But I
Right.
know your faith guides you.
Right.
That even in the midst of the fog, you know whose hand you're in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Forgiveness Road. How to forgive parents. You may be on that journey. I hope this has been a blessing to you. Would you please give us a thumbs up and hit the red subscribe button? And in our next episode, we want to introduce you to Marilyn. And Marilyn has a Forgiveness Road story about her relationship with specifically her mother. Thanks for joining us on Forgiveness Road.